Did you know that the very concept of breathing techniques in Demon Slayer wasn't originally meant to feel supernatural at all, but instead grounded in something almost real? The idea behind total concentration breathing is loosely inspired by real-world breathing disciplines used in martial arts and meditation, where controlling oxygen flow can temporarily enhance physical performance. But in the world of Demon Slayer, this idea is pushed to an extreme, turning something realistic into something that feels almost mythical, blurring the line between technique and power in a way that never fully confirms whether what we're seeing is literal or just perception. And speaking of perception, one of the most debated details in the entire series is whether the visual effects of breathing styles, like water flowing or flames igniting, are actually happening. Officially, they are not real elements, but stylized representations of swordsmanship. But the way characters react to them, especially demons, often suggests something more. This intentional ambiguity creates a strange duality where the audience is never fully certain whether these techniques are purely visual or if something deeper is happening beneath the surface. There's also an interesting detail in how demons perceive humans, particularly through smell, which becomes extremely important with characters like Tanjiro. While his heightened sense of smell is often treated as unique, it subtly mirrors how demons track humans, suggesting that the gap between humans and demons is not as wide as it first appears. Instead, it hints that both sides operate on similar sensory instincts, just developed in different directions. The origin of demons themselves ties back entirely to one figure, Muzan Kibutsuji. But what's often overlooked is how accidental his transformation was. Muzan didn't seek power in the traditional sense. He was simply trying to survive an illness. This creates an ironic foundation for the entire series, where the greatest evil wasn't born from ambition or hatred, but from desperation, turning what should have been a cure into something far worse. Another subtle detail is how Muzan distributes his blood. It's not just a way to create demons. It's a method of control. Every demon carries a portion of his power, but also a connection to his will. This is why even powerful demons fear him instinctively, not just because of strength, but because part of them quite literally belongs to him. It's less like a hierarchy and more like a network, with Muzan at the center. If you look closely at the 12 Kizuki, this idea becomes even more apparent. Their ranks aren't just about strength, but about proximity to Muzan's influence. The higher the rank, the closer they are to him, not just physically, but in terms of how much of his blood they can handle. This creates a system where power isn't earned traditionally, but granted and taken away just as easily. There's also a small but interesting detail in how demons regenerate. It might seem instant, but it actually varies depending on focus and condition. Some demons can regenerate limbs effortlessly, while others hesitate, especially when caught off guard. This suggests that regeneration isn't purely automatic, but something that requires a level of awareness, almost like a reflex that can be disrupted. The materials used by demon slayers are another overlooked detail. Their swords, made from nichirin ore, absorb sunlight, the one thing demons cannot withstand. But what's rarely mentioned is that the color of each blade changes based on the user, reflecting their affinity and potential. This isn't just aesthetic. It's a subtle way of showing that every swordsman's path is different, even if they follow the same techniques. There's also something quietly fascinating about how the Demon Slayer course operates without any official recognition from the government. Despite fighting a constant threat, they exist in secrecy, almost like a forgotten organization. This creates a strange dynamic where the people they protect often don't even know they exist, reinforcing the idea that their sacrifices go largely unseen. The Kasugai crows, often treated as simple messengers, are actually far more intelligent than they appear. Each crow is assigned to a specific slayer, learning their habits and even developing distinct personalities. This makes communication within the corps feel more personal rather than purely functional, adding another layer to how the organization maintains coordination. Another detail that's easy to miss is how demons retain fragments of their human memories. Some lose everything, becoming purely instinct-driven, while others hold on to emotions, regrets, or even attachments. This inconsistency suggests that becoming a demon doesn't erase humanity completely. It distorts it, leaving behind pieces that surface in unpredictable ways. And when you start looking at the series this way, through small details instead of major events, something becomes clear. Demon Slayer isn't just a story about humans versus demons. It's a story about transformation, about what remains when someone changes beyond recognition, and whether identity can survive that kind of shift. Because the deeper you go into this world, the more it starts to feel like the line between human and demon was never as clear as it seemed. Did you know that the ranking system within the Demon Slayer course is far more layered than it first appears, yet it's almost never explained directly? Most viewers recognize the Hashira as the strongest, but beneath them exists a full hierarchy of ranks that quietly track a Slayer's growth. What makes this interesting is that promotions aren't just based on kills, but on consistency and survival. Meaning, someone who endures longer in the field can rise even without dramatic victories, reinforcing the idea that persistence matters just as much as raw strength. There's also a small but meaningful detail in how demon slayers are trained, particularly during final selection. The mountain where this test takes place isn't just dangerous because of the demons. It's intentionally isolated and filled with wisteria at its borders, ensuring that demons cannot escape. This creates a contained ecosystem where candidates are forced to survive on their own, effectively proving not just their skill, but their ability to function without support. The existence of wisteria itself is more important than it seems. While it's commonly used as a deterrent against demons, its presence throughout the world suggests that nature already contains elements capable of resisting them. This introduces a subtle idea that demons are not completely dominant, but exist in tension with the natural world, almost like an imbalance rather than an absolute force. Another overlooked detail is how different breathing styles are connected. While they appear distinct, many are actually derivatives of sun breathing, branching off into specialized forms over time. This means that what looks like a wide variety of techniques is, at its core, part of a single system that has been adapted and reshaped across generations. This connection becomes even more interesting when you consider Yoriichi Tsugukuni, the original user of sun breathing. His existence sets a standard that no one else fully reaches, creating a quiet tension throughout the series, where every other technique feels like an attempt to replicate something that was once perfect, but can no longer be achieved in its original form. There's also something subtle in how demons view time compared to humans. Because they can live for decades, or even centuries, their sense of urgency is completely different. What feels immediate and critical to a human can feel insignificant to a demon, which is why many of them act with patience or detachment, even in situations where humans would panic. The design of demon abilities often reflects this distorted perception. Some manipulate space, others create illusions, and some control environments entirely, suggesting that their powers are not just physical, but tied to how they interpret reality. This makes each demon feel less like a standard enemy, and more like a unique perspective turned into power. There is also a noticeable pattern in how battles are structured. Instead of constant action, fights often include brief pauses, moments where characters assess, adapt, and prepare. These pauses aren't just for pacing, but highlight the importance of timing, showing that a single, well-placed action can matter more than continuous movement. The Demon Slayer uniforms themselves are another small detail that carries more meaning than expected. They're designed to be durable and resistant, but also flexible enough for rapid movement. This balance reflects the nature of their role, where defense and agility must coexist, rather than one replacing the other. Another interesting detail is how demons react to their own hierarchy. Even among the 12 Kizuki, there is a sense of unease, where lower-ranked members fear those above them almost as much as they fear Muzan. This creates a system where tension exists at every level, preventing unity and reinforcing isolation. The way injuries are treated among demon slayers also stands out. Recovery is rarely immediate, and characters often carry the effects of previous battles into future ones. This continuity gives weight to each encounter, making progress feel earned rather than reset. There's also something worth noticing in how environments influence combat. Battles that take place in confined spaces feel drastically different from those in open areas, not just visually, but strategically. Characters adjust their movements, techniques, and decisions based on their surroundings, making each fight feel context-dependent rather than repetitive. The role of fear is handled in a very specific way throughout the series. Humans often experience fear as something to overcome, pushing through it in order to act, while demons tend to suppress or redirect it, turning it into aggression or detachment. This difference highlights a fundamental divide in how each side processes emotion. And when you begin to connect all of these details together, a clearer picture starts to form. The world of Demon Slayer isn't just built on battles or abilities, but on systems, layers of structure that quietly shape how everything functions beneath the surface. Because the more you look at it, the more it feels like nothing in this world is random. Even the smallest details seem to serve a purpose, whether you notice them or not. There is a subtle but important detail in how demons are first created, where not every human who receives Muzan's blood actually survives the transformation. In fact, most die almost instantly, unable to handle the change. This suggests that becoming a demon is not simply a gift of power, but a process that requires a certain compatibility, meaning that every demon that exists is, in a way, an exception rather than the rule. The transformation itself also varies depending on the individual. Some demons lose their humanity immediately, becoming driven purely by instinct, while others retain fragments of their past, including emotions, memories, and even personal values. This inconsistency implies that the process does not overwrite identity completely, but instead reshapes it, leaving behind pieces that can resurface later. There is also something interesting in how demons refer to Muzan, often avoiding his name entirely. This is not just out of respect, but because speaking it can trigger a reaction, suggesting that his influence extends even into language. It creates a form of control that goes beyond presence, where even the act of acknowledging him carries risk. The structure of the 12 Kizuki reinforces this control further. While they are ranked by strength, their positions are not stable unless they continue to meet Muzan's expectations. Lower-ranked members are frequently replaced, creating an environment where survival depends on performance rather than loyalty, and failure is often immediate and final. Another detail that's easy to miss is how demon abilities evolve over time. Blood demon arts are not static. They develop as the demon grows stronger, becoming more complex and refined. This suggests that power in Demon Slayer is not fixed at the moment of transformation, but something that continues to change, shaped by experience and adaptation. The concept of breathing techniques also carries more depth than it initially appears. While they are taught as forms, their effectiveness depends on how well the user can maintain rhythm and control. This means that even a technically correct movement can fail if the timing is off, reinforcing the idea that mastery is about consistency rather than isolated skill. There is also a subtle connection between breathing and awareness. Characters who maintain total concentration, breathing for extended periods, often display heightened perception, reacting to movements and changes that others might miss. This suggests that breathing is not just a physical enhancement, but also a way to sharpen focus and understanding. The use of Nichiren blades introduces another layer of meaning. These swords absorb sunlight, which is the primary weakness of demons, but they also change color based on the user. This change is not purely decorative. It reflects the individual's affinity and potential, making each blade a kind of extension of its wielder. The Demon Slayer core itself operates in a way that emphasizes independence. Members are often sent on missions alone, expected to make decisions without direct supervision. This creates a system where adaptability is essential, as there is no guarantee of support when facing a threat. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react to each other. Even among allies, there is often tension, competition, or distrust, suggesting that their nature discourages cooperation. This lack of unity makes them less organized than the core, despite their individual strength. The pacing of battles often includes moments of stillness, where characters pause briefly before acting. These moments are not just for dramatic effect, but highlight the importance of timing, where a single decision can determine the outcome of the entire encounter. The role of Kasugai crows continues to stand out as well, as they are capable of delivering detailed instructions and locating specific individuals across large distances. This implies a level of intelligence and training that is rarely emphasized, but essential to how the core functions. There is also a pattern in how demons behave in their final moments. As they weaken, many begin to recall their human past, displaying emotions or memories that had been suppressed. This suggests that their humanity is not erased, but buried, only resurfacing when their power begins to fade. The contrast between humans and demons is also reflected in how they experience fear. Humans often confront fear directly, using it as motivation to act, while demons tend to suppress it or transform it into aggression, creating a difference in how each side responds to danger. And when all of these details are considered together, they begin to form a clearer understanding of the world. Demon Slayer is not just about power or conflict, but about transformation, adaptation, and the ways in which identity can change under extreme conditions. Because the more you look at it, the more it becomes clear that every character, human or demon, exists somewhere between what they were and what they have become. There is a quiet detail in how demons are often introduced through their environment before they are fully revealed, where the setting itself begins to feel unnatural long before the character appears. Rooms feel too still, sounds become distorted, or movement seems slightly off, creating the sense that something is wrong even without a visible threat. This suggests that powerful demons don't just exist within a space, but influence it in subtle ways, making their presence something that can be felt before it is seen. The Infinity Castle is one of the clearest examples of this idea, as it functions less like a building and more like a controlled dimension. Its rooms shift endlessly, stairs lead in impossible directions, and distance loses its meaning entirely, implying that the space itself is being manipulated rather than constructed. This makes it feel less like a location and more like an extension of Muzan's control, where even movement becomes something he can indirectly influence. There is also something interesting in how demons choose to interact with humans, particularly in how some prefer to remain hidden, while others actively seek confrontation. This difference suggests that their behavior is not uniform, but shaped by personality, experience, and confidence, creating a wide range of approaches rather than a single pattern. The breathing styles used by demon slayers are often presented as distinct systems, but they all originate from a single source, branching out over time into specialized forms. This means that every technique, no matter how different it appears, is connected at a fundamental level, creating a shared structure beneath the variation. This connection becomes even more meaningful when considering how rare sun breathing actually is. Unlike other styles that have been adapted and taught, sun breathing remains almost lost, with only fragments of it surviving through indirect forms. This creates a sense that the original technique represents something complete, while everything else is an attempt to replicate or interpret it. There is a subtle detail in how demons respond to damage, where some react immediately, while others remain composed, suggesting that pain is experienced differently depending on the individual. This variation implies that physical sensation is not consistent across all demons, but influenced by their mental state and level of control. The Demon Slayer core operates with minimal centralized oversight, relying instead on individual judgment and adaptability. Members are often sent on missions alone, expected to assess and respond to situations without direct instruction, which creates a system that values independence over strict coordination. The role of Kasugai crows continues to stand out as an essential but understated part of this system. They deliver instructions, locate individuals, and maintain communication across large distances, suggesting a level of intelligence and training that supports the core without drawing attention to itself. There is also something worth noticing in how demon abilities often reflect their past, where certain traits or experiences influence the form their power takes. This creates a connection between who they were and what they become, making their abilities feel personal rather than arbitrary. The use of poison within the Demon Slayer core introduces a strategic layer that contrasts with direct combat. Rather than relying solely on strength, some members develop methods that target specific weaknesses, demonstrating that knowledge can be just as important as physical ability. The pacing of battles often includes moments of stillness, where characters pause briefly before acting. These moments emphasize timing and awareness, showing that a single, well-timed action can have more impact than continuous movement. There is also a pattern in how demons behave as they approach defeat, where fragments of their human identity begin to resurface. This suggests that their transformation does not completely erase who they were, but suppresses it, allowing it to return only when their power fades. The contrast between humans and demons is reflected in how they experience fear and control. Humans often confront fear directly, using it to push forward, while demons tend to suppress or redirect it, creating a difference in how each side responds to danger. The environments in which battles take place also play a significant role, influencing movement, strategy, and outcome. Confined spaces create tension and limit options, while open areas allow for greater freedom, making each encounter feel distinct. There is also something subtle in how silence is used during certain scenes, where the absence of sound creates tension that feels intentional. allowing moments to carry weight without relying on constant action. The progression of demon slayers follows a pattern of gradual improvement, where experience leads to refinement over time, rather than sudden leaps in ability, reinforcing the idea that growth is built through consistency. And when all of these details are considered together, they reveal a world that operates through layers of subtle complexity, where small elements, often overlooked, contribute to a larger structure that continues to function without needing to explain every part of itself. There is a quiet detail in how demons remember, or fail to remember, their human lives, where memory does not disappear all at once, but fades unevenly, leaving behind fragments that surface at unexpected moments. Some demons hold on to specific emotions or images without understanding their origin, while others seem completely detached until the very end, suggesting that memory is not erased, but buried beneath layers of instinct and influence. The process of becoming a demon also introduces a subtle contradiction, because while Muzan's blood grants power, it also removes stability. Many newly turned demons cannot control themselves, acting purely on hunger, which implies that strength and control are not given at the same time. Instead, control must be developed afterward, meaning that the transformation creates imbalance before it creates power. There is also something interesting in how demons develop preferences over time, particularly in how they choose their victims. Some target specific types of people, while others consume indiscriminately, suggesting that their behavior is not entirely random, but shaped by remnants of personality or desire that persist after transformation. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers rely heavily on repetition. But what is often overlooked is how small variations can change their effectiveness. A slight shift in timing, angle, or intensity can alter the outcome of an entire movement, reinforcing the idea that mastery is found in precision rather than complexity. The connection between breathing and endurance is also more significant than it appears. Maintaining total concentration. Breathing continuously allows a slayer to operate at a higher baseline level, effectively raising their normal state of performance rather than relying on temporary bursts of strength. There is a subtle detail in how demons react to sunlight, where even the thought of exposure can trigger fear or hesitation. This suggests that their weakness is not just physical, but deeply ingrained at an instinctive level, functioning almost like a reflex rather than a learned response. The structure of the Demon Slayer Corps emphasizes independence, with members often operating alone or in small groups. This creates a system where adaptability is essential, as there is no guarantee of immediate support when facing a threat. The role of Kasugai crows continues to reflect this independence, as they provide guidance and communication without direct supervision, allowing slayers to make their own decisions while still remaining connected to the larger organization. There is also something worth noticing in how demon abilities evolve, where blood demon arts become more refined over time, suggesting that power is not static, but develops alongside the individual, shaped by experience and usage. The visual presentation of combat often emphasizes flow, where movements appear continuous rather than segmented, creating the sense that each action leads naturally into the next. This reinforces the idea that fighting is not a series of isolated events, but a connected sequence. The Hashira represent the highest level of consistency within the core, having demonstrated their ability to perform repeatedly under difficult conditions. Their strength is not just in individual skill, but in their reliability over time. The use of poison within the core highlights the importance of strategy, showing that not all battles are won through direct confrontation, but through understanding and exploiting weaknesses. There is also a pattern in how demons behave as they weaken, where their actions slow and their expressions change, often revealing traces of their former selves. This suggests that their human identity remains present beneath the surface, even if it is rarely visible. The environments in which battles occur continue to influence outcomes, with different settings creating unique challenges that require adaptation rather than repetition. There is something subtle in how silence is used during key moments, where the absence of sound allows tension to build, making the eventual action feel more impactful. The progression of demon slayers reflects a cycle of learning and refinement, where each experience contributes to gradual improvement rather than sudden transformation. The contrast between humans and demons is also reflected in how they process fear, with humans often confronting it directly, while demons suppress or redirect it, creating a difference in response. And when all of these details are considered together, they reveal a world that is shaped not just by major events, but by smaller elements that quietly influence how everything functions, creating a sense of depth that continues to expand the more closely it is observed. There is a small but meaningful detail in how the Demon Slayer core assigns missions, where slayers are often sent alone, even when the threat level is unclear, suggesting that the organization prioritizes testing individual capability over ensuring safety. This creates a system where growth is forced through exposure rather than gradual preparation, meaning that many slayers improve not because they are ready, but because they have no choice but to adapt. The swords used by demon slayers are forged from a specific type of ore that absorbs sunlight. But what is rarely emphasized is how rare and location-specific this material is. It is only found on mountains that are exposed to sunlight year-round, implying that even the creation of these weapons depends on environmental conditions, making each blade part of a limited and carefully managed resource. There is also something interesting in how demons disguise themselves within human society, often adopting roles that allow them to remain undetected for long periods. Some live among humans without drawing attention, suggesting that survival for demons is not always about strength, but about blending in, observing, and waiting for the right moment. The training methods used within the core often rely on repetition to the point of exhaustion, pushing individuals beyond what would normally be considered safe limits. This approach reflects a belief that the body can be forced to adapt under pressure, even if that pressure carries risk, reinforcing the idea that survival in this world requires exceeding normal boundaries. The structure of breathing techniques also introduces a subtle hierarchy, where some forms are more difficult to master than others, not because they are inherently stronger, but because they require a higher level of control and precision. This suggests that difficulty is tied more to execution than to raw power. There is a noticeable difference in how demons react to different types of attacks, where some forms of damage seem to disrupt their regeneration more effectively than others. This implies that not all techniques are equally efficient, and that understanding how to strike can be just as important as striking itself. The role of support characters within the Demon Slayer core is often understated, but essential. Individuals who handle logistics, recovery, and information allow frontline fighters to operate effectively, creating a system where success depends on more than just those who engage in combat directly. There is also a subtle detail in how demons interact with their surroundings, where some alter their environment intentionally, while others seem to exist within it without causing visible change. This variation suggests that environmental influence is not automatic, but depends on the individual's ability and awareness. The concept of stamina in Demon Slayer is treated differently than in many other stories, where endurance is often more important than bursts of power. Characters who can maintain their performance over time tend to have an advantage, reinforcing the idea that consistency outweighs intensity. The visual design of certain demon abilities reflects abstract concepts such as emotion, memory, or perception, suggesting that their powers are not purely physical, but tied to internal states that manifest outwardly. There is also something worth noticing in how communication occurs during battle, where characters are able to exchange information quickly without breaking focus, indicating a level of awareness that allows them to process multiple layers of information simultaneously. The Demon Slayer core's lack of public recognition continues to create a divide between the visible world and the hidden one, where the majority of people remain unaware of the constant conflict occurring around them. There is a pattern in how demons react when they are outmatched, where some become more aggressive while others attempt to retreat or manipulate the situation, suggesting that their responses are influenced by personality rather than following a single behavior. The use of terrain during combat often determines the flow of the fight, with characters adjusting their movements and strategies based on their surroundings, making each encounter unique rather than repetitive. There is also a subtle use of pacing in how tension builds, where slower moments are used to emphasize the significance of what is about to happen, rather than relying solely on continuous action. The progression of characters continues to follow a pattern of gradual improvement, where each experience contributes to their development over time, reinforcing the idea that growth is cumulative. The contrast between human and demon behavior remains consistent in how each side approaches conflict, with humans relying on discipline and adaptation, while demons often rely on instinct and power. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that is built on layers of structure and variation, where even the smallest elements play a role in shaping how everything functions beneath the surface. There is a quiet but fascinating detail in how demons do not age in the traditional sense, yet their appearance can still change over time depending on how they choose to present themselves. Some remain frozen in a specific form, while others alter their look intentionally, suggesting that physical appearance for demons is less about time passing and more about control, identity, and sometimes even preference. The way Muzan Kibutsuji experiments with his own body is another detail that often goes unnoticed, where his constant shifting of form implies that he is not satisfied with any single version of himself. This suggests that his pursuit of perfection is ongoing, not just in terms of power, but in how he exists physically, as if he is always trying to refine something that can never truly be completed. There is also something interesting in how demons perceive hierarchy beyond strength, where subtle behaviors, such as posture, tone, or hesitation, indicate awareness of rank even without direct confrontation. This implies that their system of order is reinforced not just through power, but through constant psychological recognition of status. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers rely heavily on internal rhythm. But what is often overlooked is how this rhythm must remain stable even under stress. Losing that rhythm, even briefly, can disrupt the entire flow of movement, suggesting that control in combat is as much about maintaining internal balance as it is about reacting externally. The concept of adaptability becomes especially clear when observing how experienced slayers modify their techniques mid-battle, adjusting to new patterns without fully abandoning their original style. This suggests that mastery is not rigid, but flexible, allowing for change without losing structure. There is a subtle difference in how demons experience injury depending on their mindset, where those who remain calm can continue functioning almost normally, while those who panic or lose focus begin to show signs of instability. This implies that even regeneration is influenced by mental state, not just physical capability. The design of certain environments within the series often mirrors the emotional tone of the characters present, creating a visual connection between setting and internal state. This is especially noticeable in scenes where tension builds gradually, with the surroundings reflecting that shift without needing direct explanation. The Demon Slayer Corps continues to operate in a decentralized way, where authority exists but is rarely imposed directly, allowing individuals to act based on their own judgment. This creates a structure that feels less controlled and more adaptive, relying on trust rather than strict oversight. There is also something worth noticing in how demons approach conflict when they are confident versus when they are uncertain. Confident demons often take their time, observing and analyzing, while uncertain ones act more aggressively, suggesting that behavior is influenced heavily by perception rather than just ability. The pacing of combat frequently includes brief moments where both sides pause, not out of hesitation, but to assess the situation. These pauses create space for strategy, reinforcing the idea that battles are not purely reactive, but involve continuous evaluation. The role of sensory perception continues to be important, where characters rely on different senses to interpret their surroundings. Some focus on sight, others on sound or smell, creating varied approaches to awareness that influence how they fight. There is also a pattern in how demons react to unfamiliar techniques, where hesitation often appears before adaptation, suggesting that even powerful individuals require time to understand something outside their experience. The uniforms worn by demon slayers maintain a consistent design, but subtle variations can be seen depending on the individual, reflecting personal adjustments made for comfort or practicality. The use of lighting in scenes often highlights key movements or expressions, drawing attention to specific details without needing to emphasize them through dialogue. There is something subtle in how characters maintain composure under pressure, where calmness often leads to better outcomes, reinforcing the importance of control over emotion during conflict. The progression of skill among demon slayers continues to follow a pattern where experience leads to refinement, rather than sudden leaps in ability, making growth feel gradual and consistent. The contrast between structured breathing techniques and the more chaotic nature of demon abilities highlights a difference in approach, where one relies on discipline and the other on instinct. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to build a world that feels layered and intentional, where even small observations contribute to a deeper understanding of how everything fits together beneath the surface. There is a quiet but fascinating detail in how demons do not require sleep in the same way humans do. Yet many of them still choose to rest, remain inactive, or isolate themselves for long periods of time, which suggests that rest for demons is not driven by physical necessity, but by something more psychological. This behavior feels almost like a lingering echo of their human lives, where habits continue even after the original need for them has disappeared, creating a strange overlap between instinct and memory that never fully resolves. The way Muzan Kibutsuji studies humanity is also more calculated than it first appears, because he rarely interacts directly unless necessary, instead choosing to observe patterns of behavior, emotion, and social structure from a distance. This suggests that his understanding of humans is not emotional, but analytical, treating them less as individuals and more as systems that can be predicted, manipulated, and avoided when needed. There is also something interesting in how demons gradually develop routines over time, especially those who have existed for decades or longer, where their actions begin to follow patterns that feel almost structured. They may return to the same locations, feed under similar conditions, or behave in ways that become predictable if observed closely, suggesting that even beings driven by instinct eventually create a sense of order within their existence. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers rely heavily on oxygen control, but what is often overlooked is how this directly impacts mental clarity. Maintaining a consistent breathing rhythm stabilizes focus, allowing characters to process information more efficiently and react more precisely, which becomes especially important in situations where even a slight delay could determine the outcome. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced slayers move compared to newer ones, where their actions appear smoother, more efficient, and less wasteful. This efficiency is not always immediately obvious, but it reflects a deeper understanding of movement, where every action is intentional, reducing unnecessary motion and conserving energy over time. The environments chosen by demons often reflect practical advantages rather than personal preference alone, with many selecting locations that provide natural protection from sunlight or limit exposure to potential threats. This suggests that survival plays a significant role in shaping behavior, even for those who possess overwhelming strength. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react when their expectations are challenged, where confidence can quickly shift into caution if they encounter resistance that does not align with what they anticipated. This indicates that even powerful demons rely on assumptions, and when those assumptions fail, their behavior becomes less stable. The structure of the Demon Slayer cores continues to rely on indirect coordination, where members operate independently but remain connected through shared systems of communication. This creates a balance between freedom and structure, allowing for adaptability without losing cohesion. The role of Kasugai crows reinforces this system further, as they act as consistent points of communication across long distances, delivering instructions with accuracy and timing that suggests a level of training beyond what is immediately visible. Their presence ensures that even isolated slayers remain connected to the larger organization. There is a pattern in how demon abilities are revealed during combat, where they are often introduced gradually rather than all at once, creating a sense that their full capabilities are not immediately visible. This gradual reveal forces opponents to adapt in real time, adding a layer of unpredictability to each encounter. The pacing of battles frequently shifts between moments of rapid movement and brief stillness, creating contrast that emphasizes key actions. These pauses are not empty, but filled with assessment and preparation, reinforcing the importance of timing over continuous action. There is also a subtle detail in how characters manage exhaustion, where physical limits are pushed repeatedly, but recovery is rarely immediate. This creates a sense of continuity between battles, where previous strain carries forward rather than being reset. The contrast between human adaptability and demon consistency becomes more noticeable over time, where humans evolve through experience, adjusting their approach with each encounter, while demons often rely on established patterns unless forced to change. The use of space during combat continues to influence outcomes significantly, where positioning, distance, and awareness of surroundings determine advantage as much as strength or technique, making each environment an active part of the fight. There is something subtle in how silence is used before major actions, where the absence of sound creates tension that feels intentional, allowing anticipation to build before movement occurs, making each action feel more impactful. The progression of demon slayers reflects a balance between discipline and flexibility, where structured training provides a foundation, but adaptation allows for growth beyond that foundation, creating a system that encourages both consistency and change. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on strategy, effort, and coordination, while demons often depend on instinct, power, and individual ability, creating a contrast in how each side engages with the world. There is also a quiet detail in how long-lived demons begin to show signs of detachment from immediate events, where their reactions become slower and more deliberate, suggesting that extended lifespans alter how urgency is perceived, making short-term outcomes feel less significant. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that is shaped by patterns that are not always immediately visible, where small behaviors, choices, and structures combine to create a system that feels consistent without needing to explain itself directly, allowing the story to unfold in a way that feels both natural and quietly complex. There is a subtle but important detail in how the Demon Slayer course measures progress, where success is not always tied to defeating powerful enemies, but often to simply surviving encounters that would otherwise be fatal. This creates a system where growth is not defined by dramatic victories, but by endurance, where continuing forward becomes a form of achievement in itself, especially in a world where failure often means immediate death. The way Muzan Kibutsuji responds to unpredictability is also worth noticing, because rather than reacting impulsively, he tends to eliminate uncertainty as quickly as possible. This approach reflects a mindset where control is prioritized above all else, suggesting that what he fears most is not opposition, but variables he cannot fully predict or manage. There is also something interesting in how demons adapt to repeated encounters, where they begin to recognize patterns in human behavior, adjusting their strategies accordingly. This suggests that learning is not exclusive to demon slayers, but exists on both sides, creating an ongoing cycle of adaptation between humans and demons. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers require a level of internal consistency that goes beyond physical ability, where maintaining rhythm becomes essential for sustaining performance. Disrupting that rhythm, even slightly, can reduce effectiveness, reinforcing the idea that control is just as important as strength. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced fighters conserve energy compared to newer ones, where movements become more efficient, avoiding unnecessary effort. This efficiency allows them to maintain performance for longer periods, which becomes critical during extended battles. The environments in which demons operate continue to reflect both survival and preference, where certain locations offer strategic advantages while also aligning with the individual's behavior or tendencies, creating a balance between necessity and choice. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react when they lose control of a situation, where their actions can become more erratic, suggesting that stability is maintained only as long as their expectations hold true. Once those expectations are broken, their behavior shifts. The structure of the Demon Slayer Corps allows for rapid response despite its decentralized nature, with information moving quickly between members through established systems that do not rely on direct oversight, creating a form of coordination that feels both loose and effective. The role of Kasugai crows continues to support this structure, acting as reliable messengers that bridge the gap between isolated individuals and the larger organization, ensuring that communication remains consistent even in unpredictable conditions. There is a pattern in how demon abilities are used strategically, where they are often introduced in phases rather than all at once, forcing opponents to adjust continuously. This layered approach makes each encounter feel dynamic rather than static. The pacing of combat continues to alternate between moments of rapid movement and stillness, creating a rhythm that emphasizes key actions and decisions rather than constant intensity, allowing tension to build naturally. There is also a subtle detail in how characters process information during battle, where they are able to analyze multiple factors simultaneously, suggesting a level of focus that goes beyond normal perception, especially under pressure. The contrast between human adaptability and demon reliance on established patterns becomes more apparent over time, where humans tend to adjust and evolve, while demons often depend on what has worked before until forced to change. The use of terrain remains a significant factor in determining outcomes, where positioning, obstacles, and spatial awareness influence the flow of combat as much as individual ability. There is something subtle in how silence is used during critical moments, where the absence of sound creates anticipation, making the eventual action feel more deliberate and impactful. The progression of demon slayers continues to reflect gradual improvement, where each experience contributes to their development, reinforcing the idea that growth is built over time rather than achieved instantly. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on discipline and coordination, while demons often act on instinct and individual power, creating a contrast in strategy. There is also a quiet detail in how prolonged exposure to danger affects behavior, where characters become more composed over time, suggesting that repeated experience leads to greater control rather than increased panic. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that operates through patterns of adaptation and structure, where small elements contribute to a larger system that functions without needing to explain itself fully, allowing the story to unfold with a sense of natural complexity. There is a quiet but important detail in how demon slayers are often defined not by their strengths, but by what they lack, where many of them begin their journey with clear limitations that shape how they fight and grow over time. Rather than removing these weaknesses, the story allows them to remain, forcing each individual to adapt around them, which creates a more grounded sense of progression, where improvement comes from adjustment rather than perfection. The way Muzan Kibutsuji distributes fear is also more deliberate than it first appears, because he does not rely on constant presence to maintain control. Instead, his influence persists through memory and expectation, where demons act cautiously, even in his absence, suggesting that fear, once established, becomes self-sustaining without needing reinforcement. There is also something interesting in how demons approach long-term survival, where many choose strategies that minimize risk rather than maximize gain, Some avoid confrontation entirely unless necessary, suggesting that intelligence, not just power, plays a role in how they persist over time. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers emphasize consistency, but what is often overlooked is how they affect recovery. Controlled breathing not only enhances performance during combat, but also stabilizes the body afterward, allowing for more efficient recovery between encounters. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced fighters manage distance during combat, where they maintain precise spacing that allows them to react without overcommitting. This control of distance reduces unnecessary risk and reflects a deeper understanding of positioning. The environments where demons operate continue to reflect both necessity and behavior, where certain locations provide advantages that align with how the individual prefers to act, creating a balance between practicality and personal tendency. There is also something worth noticing in how demons respond when faced with unfamiliar tactics, where hesitation often appears before adaptation. This delay suggests that even powerful individuals require time to process new information, creating opportunities for those who can introduce unpredictability. The structure of the Demon Slayer Corps allows for flexibility in how missions are approached, where individuals are given objectives, but not always specific methods, encouraging creative problem-solving rather than rigid execution. The role of Kasugai Crows continues to support this flexibility, providing information and guidance while allowing slayers to interpret and act on that information independently, maintaining a balance between direction and freedom. There is a pattern in how demon abilities escalate during encounters, where initial techniques are often followed by more complex ones as the situation evolves, suggesting that their full capabilities are not revealed immediately. The pacing of combat maintains a rhythm that alternates between movement and stillness, allowing for moments of evaluation that emphasize the importance of decision-making rather than constant action. There is also a subtle detail in how characters maintain awareness of their surroundings, where attention is divided between the opponent and the environment, creating a layered perception that supports more effective responses. The contrast between human adaptability and demon consistency continues to define many encounters, where humans adjust their approach while demons rely on established patterns until forced to change. The use of terrain remains a significant factor in shaping outcomes, where positioning, obstacles, and spatial awareness influence how each encounter unfolds. There is something subtle in how silence is used to create anticipation, where the absence of sound allows tension to build naturally before action resumes. The progression of demon slayers reflects a gradual accumulation of experience, where each encounter contributes to their overall development, rather than resulting in immediate transformation. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on discipline and coordination, while demons often depend on instinct and individual strength. There is also a quiet detail in how repeated exposure to danger affects perception, where situations that once caused hesitation begin to feel more manageable over time, suggesting that familiarity reduces fear. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that operates through subtle patterns of behavior and structure, where small elements combine to create a system that feels cohesive without requiring full explanation, allowing the story to unfold in a way that feels both natural and layered. There is a quiet but important detail in how demons perceive themselves over time, where identity becomes less stable the longer they exist, not necessarily disappearing, but shifting in ways that make it harder to define who they once were. Some begin to refer to themselves only by rank or ability, while others detach entirely from any past identity, suggesting that time, rather than transformation alone, plays a significant role in eroding the sense of self. The way Muzan Kibutsuji enforces control is also more layered than it first appears, because it is not based solely on fear or punishment, but on creating a system where independence becomes difficult to maintain. By linking power directly to his blood, he ensures that strength and control are inseparable, meaning that the more powerful a demon becomes, the more difficult it is for them to act outside his influence. There is also something interesting in how demons perceive victory, where success is often defined not by overcoming an opponent, but by maintaining dominance or avoiding risk. This creates a mindset where survival is prioritized over challenge, leading many demons to act cautiously rather than aggressively when the outcome is uncertain. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers require a level of internal discipline that extends beyond combat, where maintaining a consistent rhythm becomes part of how they exist, rather than something they activate only when needed. This constant state of control creates a higher baseline for performance, allowing them to react more efficiently under pressure. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced slayers interpret movement during battle, where they are able to anticipate actions based on subtle cues rather than waiting for full execution. This predictive awareness reduces reaction time and creates the impression that they are moving ahead of the moment rather than within it. The environments where demons choose to operate continue to reflect a balance between safety and strategy, where locations are selected not only for protection from sunlight, but for how they influence potential encounters, suggesting that positioning is considered even outside of direct combat. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react when they begin to lose control of a situation, where their behavior often becomes less structured and more reactive. This shift suggests that stability is maintained through confidence, and once that confidence is disrupted, their actions become less predictable. The structure of the Demon Slayer Corps allows for a unique form of coordination, where individuals operate independently but share a common framework of understanding, enabling them to act effectively without requiring constant communication. The role of Kasugai, crows, continues to reinforce this structure, acting as consistent links between isolated members and the larger organization, ensuring that information flows without interruption, even in unpredictable conditions. There is a pattern in how demon abilities are layered during encounters, where initial techniques are used to test opponents before more complex abilities are revealed, creating a progression that forces continuous adaptation. The pacing of combat often includes deliberate pauses that allow for assessment, emphasizing that decision-making is just as important as action, and that timing can determine the outcome more than speed alone. There is also a subtle detail in how characters manage their focus during extended encounters, where attention must be divided between immediate threats and broader situational awareness, creating a balance that supports sustained performance. The contrast between human adaptability and demon reliance on established patterns becomes increasingly apparent, where humans evolve their approach over time, while demons tend to depend on what has worked previously until it fails. The use of terrain continues to play a critical role in shaping encounters, where environmental factors influence movement, strategy, and outcome, making each battle dependent on its setting. There is something subtle in how silence is used during key moments, where the absence of sound allows tension to build gradually, making the eventual action feel more significant and deliberate. The progression of demon slayers reflects a steady accumulation of experience, where improvement is built over time rather than achieved instantly, reinforcing the importance of persistence. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on discipline and coordination, while demons often depend on instinct and individual power. There is also a quiet detail in how prolonged exposure to danger changes perception, where situations that once felt overwhelming begin to feel manageable, suggesting that familiarity reduces hesitation and increases control. Another overlooked element is how certain demons develop a sense of pride in their abilities, treating their powers almost like an identity rather than just a tool. This creates a deeper attachment to how they fight, making them less likely to adapt if it means abandoning what defines them. There is also a subtle pattern in how demon slayers learn from observation, where watching another fighter can influence their own technique, suggesting that growth is not limited to direct experience, but can come from understanding others. The contrast between fast and slow moments in the series continues to shape how tension is perceived, where quiet scenes carry as much weight as intense battles, creating a balance that prevents the story from becoming overwhelming. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that operates through layered systems of behavior, perception, and structure, where even the smallest elements contribute to a larger whole that feels consistent without needing to be fully explained, allowing the story to unfold with a quiet sense of depth and continuity. There is a quiet detail in how demon slayers develop habits outside of combat that slowly carry into how they fight, where small routines, how they stand, how they breathe when at rest, how they observe their surroundings, become part of their overall style. Over time, these habits blur the line between training and instinct, suggesting that a slayer's effectiveness is shaped just as much by what they do outside of battle as what they do within it. The way Muzan Kibutsuji views failure is also more complex than simple intolerance, because he does not just eliminate those who fail. He removes anything that introduces unpredictability into his system. This creates an environment where consistency is valued above all else, and where even slight deviations can be treated as threats rather than mistakes. There is also something interesting in how demons interpret strength, where power is often seen as something absolute rather than situational. This leads many of them to underestimate opponents who rely on strategy or adaptability, creating a recurring gap between raw ability and effective execution. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers rely on maintaining internal balance, but what is often overlooked is how easily that balance can be disrupted under pressure. Even a moment of hesitation or emotional instability can break the rhythm, reducing effectiveness and forcing the user to recover before continuing. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced fighters transition between movements, where one action flows directly into the next without pause. This continuity creates a sense of efficiency that reduces vulnerability, making their combat appear smoother and more controlled. The environments in which demons exist continue to reflect both survival and influence, where certain locations not only protect them, but also shape how encounters unfold. This suggests that setting is not just a backdrop, but an active factor in determining outcomes. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react to prolonged combat, where their behavior may shift from controlled to more aggressive as time passes, suggesting that maintaining composure becomes more difficult under extended pressure. The structure of the Demon Slayer core allows individuals to interpret situations independently, creating a system where decisions are made based on personal judgment rather than strict instruction, which supports adaptability in unpredictable conditions. The role of Kasugai crows continues to support this independence, providing information that guides rather than dictates, allowing slayers to remain flexible in how they approach each mission. There is a pattern in how demon abilities are revealed in layers, where initial techniques serve as a test before more complex abilities are introduced, forcing opponents to adjust continuously throughout the encounter. The pacing of combat often alternates between movement and stillness, creating a rhythm that emphasizes timing and awareness rather than constant action, allowing tension to build naturally. There is also a subtle detail in how characters maintain awareness during battle, where focus is divided between immediate threats and the broader environment, creating a layered perception that supports more effective responses. The contrast between human adaptability and demon reliance on established patterns continues to define many encounters, where humans evolve their approach while demons depend on what has worked before. The use of terrain remains a significant factor in shaping outcomes, where positioning and spatial awareness influence how each encounter develops. There is something subtle in how silence is used before key actions, allowing anticipation to build and making each movement feel more deliberate. The progression of demon slayers reflects a gradual accumulation of experience, where growth is built over time rather than achieved instantly, reinforcing the importance of persistence. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on discipline and coordination, while demons often depend on instinct and individual power. There is also a quiet detail in how repeated exposure to danger affects perception, where situations that once caused hesitation begin to feel manageable, suggesting that familiarity reduces fear and increases control. Another interesting element is how some demons develop a sense of attachment to their abilities, treating them as extensions of their identity rather than tools, which can limit their willingness to adapt when faced with unfamiliar challenges. There is also a subtle pattern in how demon slayers learn through observation, where watching others fight can influence their own development, suggesting that growth can occur indirectly, as well as through direct experience. The contrast between slower, reflective moments and intense combat continues to shape the overall pacing of the story, creating balance and preventing the narrative from becoming overwhelming. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that operates through interconnected systems of behavior, perception, and structure, where even the smallest elements contribute to a larger whole that feels consistent without requiring full explanation, allowing the story to unfold with a quiet sense of depth and continuity. There is a subtle but meaningful detail in how the Demon Slayer course selects who becomes a Hashira, where it is not simply about defeating a powerful demon once, but proving the ability to do so consistently under pressure. This creates a distinction between potential and reliability, where strength alone is not enough unless it can be repeated, reinforcing the idea that consistency is one of the most valued traits within the organization. The way Muzan Kibutsuji reacts to long-term threats is also different from how he handles immediate ones, because instead of confronting them directly, he often avoids situations that could introduce unnecessary risk. This suggests that his approach is not driven by pride, but by preservation, where survival takes priority over dominance when the outcome is uncertain. There is also something interesting in how demons interpret time when they have lived for extended periods, where short-term events begin to feel less significant compared to long-term existence. This creates a sense of detachment, where decisions are made with less urgency, allowing them to observe and wait rather than act immediately. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers require a level of internal discipline that extends beyond combat, where maintaining rhythm becomes part of their everyday state rather than something activated only in battle. This continuous practice creates a higher baseline of awareness and control. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced slayers handle transitions between offense and defense, where they are able to shift seamlessly without losing momentum, reducing vulnerability, and maintaining pressure on their opponent. The environments in which demons operate often provide advantages that go beyond simple protection, influencing how encounters unfold by limiting movement, visibility, or escape routes, making each location an active component of the battle. There is also something worth noticing in how demons respond to repeated failure, where some become more aggressive while others become more cautious, suggesting that behavior is influenced by individual mindset rather than following a single pattern. The structure of the Demon Slayer Corps continues to emphasize independence, where individuals are trusted to make decisions without constant supervision, allowing for adaptability in unpredictable situations. The role of Kasugai crows reinforces this independence by providing information without dictating action, ensuring that slayers remain connected while still relying on their own judgment. There is a pattern in how demon abilities escalate during encounters, where initial techniques are often followed by more complex or refined ones, creating a progression that forces continuous adaptation. The pacing of combat maintains a rhythm that alternates between rapid movement and stillness, allowing for moments of evaluation that emphasize decision-making over constant action. There is also a subtle detail in how characters maintain awareness of multiple factors during battle, where attention is divided between the opponent, the environment, and their own condition, creating a layered perception that supports effective responses. The contrast between human adaptability and demon reliance on established patterns continues to define many encounters, where humans evolve their approach while demons depend on what has worked previously. The use of terrain remains a critical factor in shaping outcomes, where positioning and spatial awareness influence how each encounter develops. There is something subtle in how silence is used during key moments, allowing tension to build gradually and making each action feel more deliberate. The progression of demon slayers reflects a steady accumulation of experience, where improvement is built over time rather than achieved instantly, reinforcing the importance of persistence. The difference in how humans and demons approach conflict remains consistent, with humans relying on discipline and coordination, while demons often depend on instinct and individual strength. There is also a quiet detail in how prolonged exposure to danger affects behavior, where repeated encounters lead to greater composure and reduced hesitation, suggesting that familiarity changes perception. Another interesting element is how some demons develop a sense of identity around their abilities, treating them as defining traits rather than tools, which can limit their willingness to adapt when faced with new challenges. There is also a subtle pattern in how demon slayers refine their techniques through observation, where watching others can influence their own development, suggesting that growth can occur indirectly. The contrast between slower, reflective moments and intense combat continues to shape the overall pacing, creating a balance that prevents the story from becoming overwhelming. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to reveal a world that operates through interconnected systems of behavior, perception, and structure, where even small elements contribute to a larger whole that feels consistent without needing to explain itself fully. There is a quiet but important detail in how the world of Demon Slayer. Kimetsu no Yaiba never fully explains everything it introduces, leaving certain mechanics, limits, and possibilities slightly undefined, which creates a sense that the system is larger than what is shown. This absence of full explanation is not a gap, but a deliberate choice, allowing the world to feel open-ended rather than fully contained. The way Muzan Kibutsuji approaches existence itself is also worth noticing, because his goal is not domination in the traditional sense, but permanence. Everything he does, every decision, every action, is centered around removing the possibility of death, which makes his character less about power and more about control over inevitability. There is also something interesting in how demons gradually lose the need to question their own existence, where over time, survival replaces reflection. This suggests that the longer they live, the less they consider what they are, focusing instead on continuing to exist, which creates a quiet contrast with humans, who often define themselves through purpose. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers continue to reflect this contrast, requiring constant awareness and discipline, where the act of breathing becomes a reminder of control, intention, and presence. It is not just a method of fighting, but a way of maintaining identity in a world where that identity is constantly challenged. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced fighters manage uncertainty, where they do not attempt to eliminate it entirely, but learn to function within it. This allows them to remain effective even when outcomes are unclear, suggesting that adaptability is not about control, but about comfort with unpredictability. The environments in which encounters take place continue to shape the experience, not just physically, but emotionally, where certain settings create tension or calm without needing explicit explanation, reinforcing the atmosphere of each moment. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react when faced with something they cannot immediately understand, where hesitation appears briefly before they attempt to adapt, suggesting that even the most powerful individuals are limited by perception. The structure of the Demon Slayer core remains consistent in its reliance on individuals rather than centralized control, creating a system where strength comes from the collective actions of many, rather than the direction of a few. The role of Kasugai, crows, continues to reflect this structure, acting as quiet connectors between individuals, ensuring that communication exists without overshadowing independence. There is a pattern in how encounters build toward resolution, where initial uncertainty gradually gives way to clarity, not through sudden realization, but through a series of small adjustments that lead to a final outcome. The pacing of these encounters continues to rely on rhythm, where movement and stillness alternate in a way that feels natural, allowing tension to rise and fall without becoming overwhelming. There is also a subtle detail in how characters maintain awareness of their own limits, where understanding what they cannot do becomes just as important as knowing what they can, reinforcing the idea that restraint is a form of control. The contrast between human growth and demon stagnation becomes more apparent over time, where humans continue to change and evolve, while demons often remain fixed unless something forces them to adapt, creating a difference in how each side approaches existence. The use of terrain continues to influence not only strategy, but perception, where space defines possibility, shaping how actions unfold within it. There is something subtle in how silence is used at the end of certain moments, where the absence of action allows reflection to take place, giving weight to what has already happened rather than what is about to happen. The progression of demon slayers reaches a point where improvement becomes less visible, shifting from obvious growth to refinement, where changes are smaller but more meaningful, suggesting that mastery is not about becoming something new, but about perfecting what already exists. The difference in how humans and demons understand purpose remains consistent, with humans often seeking meaning beyond survival, while demons tend to focus on continuation alone, creating a philosophical divide that underlies much of the story. There is also a quiet detail in how repeated exposure to conflict changes how characters perceive the world, where danger becomes familiar, and familiarity reduces hesitation, allowing for more controlled responses over time. Another interesting element is how certain characters begin to move beyond rigid technique, blending structure with instinct in a way that feels more natural, suggesting that true mastery lies somewhere between discipline and intuition. There is also a subtle pattern in how lessons are carried forward, where each encounter leaves behind something that influences future decisions, even if it is not immediately obvious, creating continuity in how characters evolve. The contrast between action and reflection continues to define the pacing, where moments of stillness are given just as much importance as moments of intensity, creating balance within the narrative. And when all of these details are considered together, they begin to form something larger than individual facts, revealing a world that is not just built on conflict or ability, but on patterns of behavior, perception, and change, where everything connects quietly beneath the surface. Because in the end, the most interesting part of Demon Slayer is not just what is shown, but everything that is left just slightly out of reach, allowing the world to feel like it continues beyond what we see, even when the story itself comes to an end. There is a quiet but fascinating detail in how many Demon Slayers develop their own micro-adjustments to techniques that are never formally named, where slight shifts in grip, stance, or breathing pattern become personal variations that only they use. These changes are rarely acknowledged directly, but they accumulate over time, creating a version of each technique that is subtly unique, even if it still falls under the same form. And this gradual personalization suggests that mastery is not about copying perfectly, but about refining something until it fits the individual using it. The way demons react to unfamiliar environments is also more revealing than it first appears, because even powerful demons tend to show brief hesitation when removed from spaces they understand. This suggests that confidence is often tied to familiarity, and that environment plays a larger role in their behavior than just physical advantage, shaping how quickly they are able to respond when conditions change. There is also something interesting in how long-term exposure to danger reshapes decision-making, where characters begin to rely less on instinctive reactions and more on controlled responses. Over time, this creates a shift from emotional action to calculated movement, making experienced fighters appear calmer, even in high-pressure situations, as if they are no longer reacting to danger, but moving through it with awareness. The structure of breathing techniques allows for something subtle but important: recovery within motion. Instead of stopping to regain control, experienced users are able to stabilize their breathing while still moving, which creates a continuous flow where action and recovery happen at the same time, making endurance feel less like a limit and more like something that can be managed. There is a noticeable difference in how demons interpret resistance, where weaker opponents are often dismissed quickly. But unexpected resistance creates a moment of reevaluation. This suggests that their perception of strength is based on expectation. And when that expectation is challenged, it disrupts their confidence and forces them to reconsider their approach. The environments in which encounters take place continue to shape not only strategy, but pacing, where confined spaces slow movement and increase tension, while open areas allow for faster, more fluid exchanges. This variation ensures that no two battles feel exactly the same, even when the techniques being used are familiar. There is also something worth noticing in how the Demon Slayer core maintains continuity despite losses, where new members are constantly integrated without disrupting the overall structure. This creates a system that persists even as individuals come and go, reinforcing the idea that the organization is larger than any single person, and that its purpose continues regardless of who is part of it at any given time. The role of communication within the cores remains subtle but essential, where information is shared efficiently without drawing attention to the process itself, allowing coordination to happen almost invisibly. This quiet system supports everything else, even if it is rarely highlighted. There is a pattern in how characters begin to anticipate not just actions, but intentions, where they read subtle cues before movement occurs. This predictive awareness reduces reaction time and creates the impression that they are always slightly ahead of the moment, responding to what is about to happen rather than what already has. The pacing of encounters continues to rely on contrast, where slower moments allow for build-up, making faster actions feel more impactful when they occur, reinforcing the rhythm that defines the series. There is also a subtle detail in how exhaustion influences perception, where prolonged effort can distort awareness, forcing characters to rely more on instinct when their focus begins to fade. This creates a balance between control and reaction that shifts over time. The contrast between structured techniques and improvisation becomes more apparent over time, where experienced fighters blend both approaches, using discipline as a foundation while allowing for flexibility when needed, creating a style that feels both controlled and adaptive. The use of terrain continues to affect decision-making, where positioning becomes a constant consideration, shaping how each movement is executed and how each exchange unfolds. There is something subtle in how silence follows certain actions, allowing the outcome to settle before the next movement begins, creating a rhythm that feels natural rather than forced, where moments are given time to exist before being replaced. The progression of skill continues to move toward refinement, where improvements become smaller but more precise, suggesting that mastery is about reducing error rather than increasing output, where the focus shifts from doing more to doing things correctly. The difference in how humans and demons process uncertainty remains consistent, with humans adapting to it while demons often attempt to eliminate it. creating a contrast in how each side approaches unpredictable situations and how they respond when control begins to slip. There is also a quiet detail in how repeated exposure to combat creates familiarity with danger, where what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable, allowing for more controlled responses over time and reducing hesitation in moments that would have once caused doubt. Another layer to this is how experienced fighters begin to conserve not just energy, but intention, where unnecessary actions are gradually removed, leaving behind only what is essential, creating a form of efficiency that is difficult to notice, but deeply effective. And when all of these details are considered together, they continue to build on the idea that Demon Slayer is not just about individual moments, but about accumulation, where small adjustments, repeated over time, create something that feels seamless and intentional, forming a system that works quietly beneath everything else. There is a subtle but important detail in how endings are handled within Demon Slayer. Kimetsu no Yaiba, where resolution rarely feels absolute, and instead leaves behind small traces of what came before. Even when conflicts are resolved, the impact remains visible, suggesting that events do not simply conclude, but continue to influence what follows in quieter ways, creating a sense that the story extends beyond what is directly shown. The way Muzan Kibutsuji approaches permanence also reveals something deeper, because his actions are not driven by conquest, but by the need to eliminate anything that threatens his existence. This creates a perspective where survival becomes the only goal, stripping away everything else, including meaning or connection, leaving behind a mindset focused entirely on continuation. There is also something interesting in how demons gradually lose the need for reflection, where over time they stop questioning their actions or existence, focusing only on survival. This creates a contrast with humans, who often define themselves through purpose rather than continuation alone, highlighting a philosophical divide within the story. The breathing techniques used by demon slayers continue to reflect this contrast, requiring awareness and intention, where each movement is tied to control and understanding, reinforcing identity through action rather than instinct. There is a noticeable difference in how experienced fighters approach uncertainty, where instead of resisting it, they move within it, allowing for adaptation rather than forcing control over every outcome. This creates a sense of fluidity in how they respond to changing conditions. The environments where encounters take place continue to influence emotional tone, where certain settings create tension or calm without needing direct explanation, reinforcing atmosphere through subtle design rather than overt detail. There is also something worth noticing in how demons react when faced with something they cannot immediately overcome, where hesitation appears before aggression, suggesting that even confidence has limits when expectations are broken. The structure of the Demon Slayer core remains consistent in its reliance on individuals working within a shared framework, creating a system that functions without needing strict central control, allowing for flexibility and independence. The role of communication continues to support this system, ensuring that information moves efficiently without overwhelming the individuals who rely on it. maintaining a balance between guidance and autonomy. There is a pattern in how encounters resolve, where clarity emerges gradually rather than suddenly, through a series of small adjustments that lead to a final outcome, reinforcing the idea that change happens step by step, rather than all at once. The pacing of these moments continues to alternate between action and stillness, allowing tension to build and release naturally, creating a rhythm that feels consistent throughout the story. There is also a subtle detail in how characters recognize their own limits, where understanding what cannot be done becomes just as important as knowing what can, reinforcing restraint as a form of control and awareness. The contrast between human growth and demon stagnation becomes even more apparent over time, where humans continue to evolve through experience, while demons often remain unchanged unless forced to adapt, creating a clear divide in how each side develops. The use of terrain continues to shape both perception and action, where space defines possibility, influencing how each movement unfolds and how each encounter progresses. There is something subtle in how silence is used after key moments, allowing reflection to take place and giving weight to what has already occurred, rather than rushing forward into the next action. The progression of demon slayers reaches a point where improvement becomes less visible, shifting toward refinement and precision, suggesting that mastery is about control rather than expansion, where smaller changes carry greater meaning. The difference in how humans and demons approach purpose remains consistent, with humans seeking meaning beyond survival, while demons focus on continuation alone, reinforcing the philosophical contrast between the two. There is also a quiet detail in how repeated exposure to conflict changes perception, where danger becomes familiar, reducing hesitation and allowing for more deliberate action, creating a sense of calm within chaos. Another interesting element is how certain characters begin to move beyond rigid technique, blending structure with instinct in a way that feels natural, suggesting that true mastery exists between discipline and intuition, rather than fully within either one. There is also a subtle pattern in how lessons are carried forward, where each encounter leaves behind something that shapes future decisions, even if it is not immediately obvious, creating continuity in development over time. The contrast between movement and stillness continues to define the pacing, where both are given equal importance in shaping the overall experience, preventing the narrative from becoming overwhelming. And when all of these details are considered together, they begin to form a complete picture, not of a world that is fully explained, but of one that feels alive through its patterns, its subtle consistency, and the way it allows meaning to emerge gradually rather than all at once, leaving the sense that even after everything ends, something continues just beyond what can be seen.